Have you ever wondered how Japanese families eat restaurant quality meals every single night while spending only a fraction of what you spend at the grocery store each month? For centuries, Japanese home cooks have mastered cooking tricks that Western food experts once dismissed as fussy, backward, or completely unnecessary. From using baking soda to turn the cheapest cut of supermarket beef into steakhouse tender meat, to using a simple water trick that rescues a pot of noodles from turning gummy, these are the everyday habits that save Japanese families hundreds every month. And in this video, we will uncover all 22 of them so you can start using them in your own kitchen tonight. Some are so simple you will wonder why nobody ever told you. And one of them, the very last one on this list, involves a single pot most Japanese families keep for years. And it might be the most extraordinary secret in any kitchen music on earth. Let's get straight into it. Our first Japanese cooking trick uses a pinch of baking soda to turn the toughest, cheapest cuts of beef into meat, as tender as anything from a good steakhouse. A strip of that cheap beef gets dusted with a small amount of the white powder and left to rest on a plate for 15 minutes. For generations, Japanese cooks knew that baking soda could unlock a tenderness in cheap cuts that expensive marinades could never reach. Western food safety guides warned home cooks against the practice for years, and restaurants around the world have been using it under a new name, velveting. Baking soda raises the surface pH of the meat, which stops its proteins from tightening up and squeezing water out during cooking, so it stays tender no matter how hot the pan gets. Rub a 4 teaspoons of baking soda into a pound of beef or pork, let it sit for 15 minutes, rinse it thoroughly under cold water, pat it dry, and cook it as normal. That pinch of baking soda is only the first ingredient Japanese cooks reach for before the real cooking begins. Fresh ginger is another, and Japanese cooks use it in a way no Western kitchen ever bothered with. Our second Japanese cooking trick is a ginger rub for the pan that stops fish from ever sticking again. Before any oil goes into a smoking hot pan, a thick slice of fresh ginger held with chopsticks or tongs gets rubbed across the entire surface of the metal for about 20 seconds. Western cookbooks dismissed this as pointless for decades. The ginger transfers a thin layer of its natural compounds directly onto the hot metal, creating an invisible barrier between the fish and the pan that no amount of oil alone can create. The result is a fish fillet that releases cleanly, flips without tearing, and browns evenly on both sides. But if a single slice of ginger can transform a hot pan, wait until you see what the Japanese do with the cloudy water most cooks pour straight down the drain. Our third Japanese cooking trick is to save the cloudy water that pours off your rice during rinsing and use it as an ingredient in its own right. Walk into any Japanese kitchen at rice cooking time and you will notice a small bowl sitting next to the sink whose only job is to catch that milky white water which the Japanese call tajiru. Western dietitians told Japanese housewives for decades that this water was dirty and should go straight down the drain, and that advice ignored what the Japanese had understood for centuries. Togeu is loaded with soluble starches, B vitamins, and rice bran oils that have leached off the outer layer of the rice grain during the rinse. Used as the cooking liquid for daikon or root vegetables, the light starch content coats the vegetables and pulls out bitterness while helping them absorb flavor later. Used as the base of a simple soup, it adds body and a subtle sweetness that plain water cannot provide. Japanese grandmothers even use it as a face rinse. But for our purposes, what matters is what it does in the pot. Rice water is only one example of how Japanese families squeeze value out of ingredients most of us pour straight down the drain. And if you would like to cut hundreds of dollars off your grocery bill every single month, keep your pantry from ever going to waste, and turn the cheapest ingredients on the shelf into meals your family will love. I have pulled every one of these Japanese habits into a book called The Complete Japanese Kitchen Handbook. It's at the Frugal Japan, and got it. Scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description below for instant access. Now our fourth trick is a 2-minute meat blanch called shuri, and it is what transforms every stew, soup, and broth you will ever cook. Raw meat goes into a pot of cold water, comes slowly to a boil, and releases a rising cloud of gray foam that most Western cooks would have spent an hour skimming from a finished stew. In the Japanese kitchen, this cloud has already been removed before the real cooking has even begun. The technique is called shiofuri, which music translates as frost falling. For centuries, before any Japanese soup or braise cooks have blanched their meat in cold water, boiled it briefly, then drained and rinsed it under cold water before starting the actual recipe. Western cooking guides called this wasteful and warned it would strip out flavor. What the blanching actually draws out is surface blood coagulated proteins and any faint metallic taste that would otherwise cloud the finished broth. What stays inside the meat is muscle protein, collagen, and fat, which is where the real depth of a stew comes from. The finished broth is clearer, the flavor is cleaner, and no skimming is required. Cover your meat or bones with cold water. Bring it to a boil for 3 minutes, drain, rinse under cold water, and start your real recipe with clean meat. But if a simple cold water bath can rescue the flavor of every stew you will ever make, wait until you hear the single strange act that Japanese noodle cooks have used for centuries to keep pasta from turning gummy. Our fifth trick is a splash of cold water added to boiling noodles, and it is what stops soba, udon, and dumplings from ever turning gummy in the middle. The pot is at a rolling boil and a small cup of cold water gets deliberately poured in, calming the surface for about 15 seconds. Japanese cooks have been doing this on purpose for centuries. The technique is called bikuri mizu, which translates as surprise water, and cooks preparing soba udon or fresh dumplings have used this trick to keep noodles cooking evenly from edge to center. Western cooking guides insisted it was pointless and only extended cooking time for no reason. What is actually happening is that a violent boil overcooks the outside of the noodle long before the inside is done because heat cannot travel through the starchy interior fast enough to keep music pace with the surface. A splash of cold water calms the surface for just long enough to let the internal heat catch up with the outside. Modern food physics has confirmed exactly what Japanese cooks knew intuitively. 2 or 3 splashes across the cooking time is all it takes. And you end up with noodles that are cooked through evenly with a proper bite from edge to center and no gummy outer layer. Water is only one ingredient Japanese cooks handle differently from Western kitchens. Salt is another, and a small handful of it will turn limp vegetables into a side dish crisp enough to keep for a week. Thin cucumber slices sit in a bowl with a fine sprinkling of salt, while a pair of hands gently kneads them for a minute, and the vegetables then rest for 10 minutes and release their water on their own. For centuries before any Japanese salad or side dish vegetables have been salt massaged, and the technique is called shiomi. Western cookbooks called it unnecessary and warned that it would ruin the crunch. The salt is doing 2 things at once. It draws out excess water through osmosis, which concentrates the natural flavor of the vegetable so it tastes fuller and cleaner. And the gentle pressure of the massage breaks down the tough cell walls just enough to soften the texture without cooking away the crunch, which lets later seasonings like rice, vinegar, soy sauce, or sesame oil actually penetrate the flesh underneath. Salads dressed this way stay crisp for days. And every one of these vegetables becomes an instant pickle that keeps in the fridge for the better part of a week. Slice your cucumber or cabbage thin. Sprinkle it with fine salt, equal to about 2% of its weight. Massage gently for a minute. Let it rest 10 minutes. Then squeeze out the water with your hands. But if a pinch of salt can turn a cucumber into a treasure, wait until you learn the ratio the Japanese have used for centuries to unlock the true flavor hiding inside every bottle of soy sauce. Look at the small bowl of Nimono sauce sitting on the Japanese kitchen counter, holding just 1 tablespoon of dark soy sauce and 1 teaspoon of pale sugar stirred together into a marinade that looks impossibly simple. This is the ratio that separates restaurant Japanese food from every home attempt anyone has ever made. Every Japanese nimono, the whole category of simmered dishes that forms the backbone of Japanese home cooking, is built on the simple arithmetic of 1 part sugar to 3 parts soy. American cooks who first encountered these dishes dismissed them as unnecessarily sweet. What the sugar is really doing is far more clever than adding sweetness. Soy sauce contains significant concentrations of naturally bitter compounds that develop during fermentation, and sugar molecules directly block the specific bitter taste receptors on the human tongue in a process food scientists call bitter masking. The sugar is turning down the bitter flavor that is already there, which reveals the deeper, savory notes underneath. Add 1 teaspoon of sugar for every tablespoon of soy sauce in your simmered dishes, marinades, and glazes, and the improvement in balance is immediate. Sugar is one hidden weapon in the Japanese pantry. Ginger is another, and Japanese cooks refuse to slice it for soups, the way Western recipes insist on choosing to smash it flat instead. Our 8th trick is smash ginger for broths and stocks, and it is the single reason Japanese soups taste twice as fragrant as any Western attempt. The flat side of a cleaver falls once music twice. 3 times on a knob of ginger until the whole piece splits open and releases its scent into the room before it ever touches the pot. For generations, Japanese cooks preparing dashi chicken broths and simmered stocks have refused to slice ginger for these purposes, choosing instead to smash it flat with the side of a knife. Western recipes insisted on clean slices for maximum surface area, and they got the science exactly backwards. A clean blade slice cuts through cells, leaving most of them intact on either side of the cut, which limits the surface area, actively releasing volatile compounds into the surrounding liquid. Smashing ruptures thousands of cells at once across a large volume of the root, releasing far more of the aromatic oils directly into the broth. The whole piece then infuses continuously without disintegrating, and it lifts out cleanly at the end. Lay your ginger piece flat on a cutting board and strike it 3 firm times with the flat side of a heavy knife or the base of a heavy mug. Then drop the smashed pieces into your broth. The depth of ginger flavor in the finished stock will be noticeably different. But if a smashed piece of ginger can deepen a whole pot of broth, wait until you meet the 20-minute salt cure that turns the cheapest fillet of supermarket salmon into something worth serving to guests. Our 9th trick is a 2-0 Inut salt cure for fish, and it turns the cheapest fillet of supermarket salmon into something worth serving to guests. A fillet of ordinary salmon gets dusted lightly with fine salt and left on a plate, and beads of moisture rise slowly to its surface as it rests. In those 20 minutes, the fish changes completely. For centuries, Japanese cooks have salt-cured fish before grilling or pan-frying, using a lighter version of an ancient technique called shiojime. Western cooking guides told cooks to season fish only at the moment of cooking, which is why so many home cooks think supermarket salmon just tastes off. The salt is drawing surface moisture out of the fish and drawing with it the faint, fishy odor compounds that many people mistake for the fish itself being poor quality. What remains is denser, cleaner, and browns beautifully in a hot pan. Sprinkle fine salt evenly over both sides of your fillet. Leave it uncovered on a plate for 20 minutes, then pat it thoroughly dry with paper towels before cooking as usual. The cheapest filet or supermarket will suddenly taste like something from a good restaurant for the cost of a pinch of salt. Salt is only one of the things a Japanese cook uses to transform a fish before it ever hits the pan. Even the cooking oil itself gets turned into a hidden flavor layer no Western kitchen ever bothered with. Our 10th trick is called cold oil aromatic infusion, and it is how Japanese cooks turn ordinary cooking oil into a hidden flavor layer no Western kitchen ever bothered with. The pan sits cold on the burner, oil goes in, then ginger slices and scallion whites drop in before any flame has been lit, and music, the heat comes up slowly while the oil begins to fill with fragrance long before the first reel. The ingredient of the dish enters the pan. In old Japanese kitchens, aromatics were always placed in the oil while the pan was cold and brought up together, allowing them to infuse the fat before any food touched it. Western cooks were told to always add aromatics to hot oil for a quick sizzle, which extracts almost none of what an aromatic actually holds. Slow infusion pulls fat-soluble flavor compounds from ginger and scallions far more completely than flash cooking does. The essential oils have time to fully dissolve into the surrounding fat, saturating it with flavor rather than scorching the surface of the aromatic and stopping there. That flavored oil then coats every ingredient that hits the pan afterward. Place your cold pan on the burner. Add your oil. Add your ginger slices and scallion pieces and turn the heat to medium. Wait until you see gentle, sizzling, and golden edges around the aromatics. Then remove them and proceed with your cooking. But if cold oil can carry restaurant flavor into every dish, wait until you see what a simple salt bath does to a block of tofu most Western cooks have never learned to love. The block of firm tofu sits in gently simmering salted water for 12 minutes, undisturbed while its interior reshapes itself. For as long as tofu has been part of the Japanese kitchen, cooks have known it must be prepared before it is prepared. A saltwater simmer transforms the block long before it ever meets the pan. Western cooking instructions treated this step as pointless, since tofu was already cooked when sold, and most home cooks have been dealing with bland tofu that has the texture of pudding ever since. The salt water is doing 2 things at the same time. It draws excess interior water out of the tofu through osmosis, creating a denser texture that fries without violent oil splatter and holds its shape in any braise. And the gentle heat causes the internal protein matrix of the tofu to tighten and reorganize into something with a satisfying bite. Bring a pot of water with 1 tablespoon of salt per quart to a gentle simmer. Add your firm tofu. Cook it for 12 minutes. Drain it and pat it dry before frying, grilling, or braising as normal. You will get a golden crust, a firm bite, no oil splatter, and no bland center. A salted water simmer is one preparation trick that transforms a single ingredient. A small paper circle placed on top of a simmering pot is another, and it will change every braise you ever cook from now on. Our 12th trick is called the drop lid, or odo shibuda in Japanese, and it will transform every braise you ever cook again. A circle of parchment paper with a small hole cut in the center lies directly on top of the simmering food rather than on the pot itself. For centuries, Japanese cooks have used a small wooden or paper disc plate placed directly on the food's surface during simmering, and the tool is called odo shibuda, which translates as drop lid. Western cookware companies ignored it entirely and sold tight sealing casseroles instead, and generations of home cooks have been fighting with tough braises ever since. A tight lid traps too much steam, drives up pressure inside the pot, contracts muscle fibers, and toughens meat. An open pot loses liquid too fast and leaves the top of the food dry. The drop lid presses gently on the food to keep it submerged, allows steam to escape at a controlled rate around its edges, and circulates the reducing sauce back over the food with every rising bubble. Cut a circle of parchment paper the size of the interior of your pot. Cut a small vent hole in the center and lay it directly on the food while it simmers. Braised dishes will turn out more tender in less time with a glossier sauce and no need to stir. But if a scrap of parchment can transform every braise you will ever cook, wait until you learn why Japanese cooks refuse to let water touch a mushroom. Our 13th trick is a strict rule Japanese cooks refuse to break, and that is to never wash mushrooms with water. A soft brush or a slightly damp cloth travels over the cap of a fresh mushroom, cleaning it without soaking it. And in the Japanese kitchen, water and mushrooms are always kept apart. For centuries, Japanese cooks have treated mushrooms as delicate ingredients that need to be handled without water. Western cookbooks told home cooks to rinse them under the tap, and generations of pans have been ruined as a result. Mushrooms are structurally close to sponges, so they absorb water almost instantly, and every drop they absorb dilutes their flavor and prevents proper browning in a pan. A soft brush or a barely damp cloth removes any dirt without water logging the flesh underneath, which means the mushroom keeps its full concentration of flavor, and the pan gets a real sear instead of a steam. If your mushrooms are especially dirty, wipe them one at a time with a damp cloth and dry them immediately with a paper towel, and never soak, rinse, or leave them sitting in water for any length of time. The difference in a stir fry or a saute is immediate and dramatic. Mushrooms are one ingredient Japanese cooks keep away from water. Eggs are one they add a small splash of vinegar to. And the reason is going to save you every time you boil an egg from now on. The pot of water comes to a boil and a small capful of rice vinegar goes in before the first egg is lowered. For generations, Japanese cooks have added a small splash of vinegar to the water when boiling eggs. Western guides called this pointless and told cooks that only fresh eggs mattered. The vinegar is doing two things at once. The acid quickly denatures any egg white that escapes through a hairline crack in the shell, sealing it before the egg empties into the pot. And the mild acidity of the cooking water helps loosen the bond between the egg white and the shell membrane, which is exactly what makes peeling so difficult with most home methods. One splash of vinegar per pot and your eggs will peel almost effortlessly every single time. Even with the very fresh eggs that would normally be a nightmare to shell, add about 1 tablespoon of rice vinegar to the water before the eggs go in. Boil as normal and cool the eggs briefly in cold water before peeling. But if a splash of vinegar can rescue an egg, wait until you smell what happens when a handful of small pale seeds meets a dry pan for the first time. The pan is dry, hot, and empty, and a scatter of pale sesame seeds hits its surface, filling the kitchen within 30 seconds, with an aroma no jar of pre-toasted seeds could ever match. For centuries, Japanese cooks have refused to buy sesame seeds already toasted, choosing instead to toast them fresh just before use in a dry pan over medium heat until the seeds turn golden and begin to jump on their own. The Japanese word for this practice is pre-toasted seeds lose their volatile aromatic oils within days of sitting in a jar on a supermarket shelf, and by the time they reach your kitchen, most of their character is gone. Fresh toasted seeds release those oils in the moment they hit the food. A $3 jar of raw seeds becomes a completely different ingredient. The same ingredient Japanese kitchens have used to elevate rice, vegetables, and dressings for 1,000 years. Heat a small dry pan over medium heat. Add your raw sesame seeds in a single layer. Stir constantly with a wooden spoon for about 30 to 60 seconds and remove the pan from the heat the moment they begin to color and pop. Sprinkle them warm over rice salads or steamed vegetables. Fresh toasted seeds are one small habit that Japanese kitchens hold on to. Another is a simple cotton cloth used at cooling time, and it turns yesterday's leftovers into something that tastes better the next day than the night it was made. Our 16th trick is a cotton cloth cool down for your leftovers before they ever hit the fridge. And it is exactly why Japanese leftovers always taste better the next day. The finished dish sits on the counter covered with nothing more than a clean cotton cloth, and steam rises gently through the weave as it cools slowly under the kitchen light. For as long as Japanese households have had refrigerators, cooked food has been allowed to cool to room temperature under a breathable cloth before being sealed and stored. Western guidelines told families to seal food immediately and put it into the fridge as fast as possible, which turned out to be almost exactly the wrong advice. Hot sealed food in a cold fridge causes moisture inside the container to condense on the underside of the lid and drip back down onto the food, creating a wet, high humidity microenvironment that ironically accelerates spoilage at the very refrigerator temperatures that were supposed to prevent it. A cloth covered during cooling lets the steam escape gradually. So by the time the food is transferred into a sealed container, the surface is already dry and stable. Modern food microbiology research has confirmed exactly what Japanese grandmothers knew all along. Allow your cooked dishes to cool under a light cotton cloth or a folded tea towel for no more than 2 hours before transferring them to sealed containers, and leftovers will taste better the next day while the fridge itself will stay cleaner. But if a cotton cloth can protect what is inside the fridge, wait until you see the second cloth that protects what is inside the rice pot. The rice cooker clicks off, and within moments the lid is lifted. A clean cloth is folded gently across the top of the pot, and the lid is replaced over the cloth. The rice now rests for 10 minutes under that cloth before it is served. For centuries, Japanese cooks have known that finished rice is not truly finished, and the final rest is where every grain becomes distinct. The cloth used for this rest is called musharasu. Without a cloth, condensation gathers on the underside of the lid and drips back down onto the rice, creating the wet, mushy patches on the top layer that most home cooks accept as normal. The cloth catches that condensation and lets the internal moisture redistribute evenly through the pot. What comes out is rice, where every single grain stands separate, plump, and dry on the surface. Lay a clean tea towel or a folded paper towel across the top of your rice pot before replacing the lid for its final rest, and you will get restaurant-quality grain separation every single time. Cloths are the smallest tool a Japanese cook ever reaches for. The next habit uses no tool at all, and it is what keeps a Japanese meal hot from the first bite to the last without any reheating ever needed. The stack of empty plates sits warming in a low oven or under a rush of hot tap water while the food finishes on the stove, because a cold plate has never touched a Japanese meal. For generations, Japanese homes have warmed the plate before the food ever meets it. Western dining traditions treated plates as neutral surfaces delivered straight from the cupboard to the table, and the food arrived cold as a result. A cold plate can drop the temperature of a hot dish by 15 or 20 degrees within the first minute of serving, which means food that was perfect in the pan arrives lukewarm and often needs reheating that would have been completely unnecessary if the plate itself had been warm. A warm plate keeps the meal at its intended temperature from the first bite to the last, preserving flavor aroma, and over the course of a year, meaningful amounts of energy and money that would have been spent on that reheating. Place your plates in a low oven at about 150 degrees for 10 minutes before serving, or run them briefly under hot tap water and dry them off just before plating. Every meal you serve will taste hotter, fresher, and more complete. But if a warm plate can preserve a meal, wait until you see the brown liquid the Japanese have used for centuries to build restaurant-depth flavor out of almost nothing. The small bowl has been sitting on the counter overnight, and dried shiitake mushrooms float in cold water, while the liquid slowly darkens from clear to deep brown as the mushrooms release everything they contain into the water around them. In every Japanese kitchen, this dark liquid is treated as one of the most valuable ingredients on the counter, and its name is Shiate Modoshi Jiru. Western cooks were told to soak dried mushrooms briefly in hot water and pour the soaking water away, throwing out the actual prize every single time. The soaking liquid holds an extraordinary concentration of natural umami compounds, some of the most powerful flavor amplifiers on earth. Combined with the glutamate and soy sauce or seaweed, the two multiply each other's savory impact many times over. A splash of this water into any soup braised sauce or rice pot delivers a depth of flavor that no store-bought stock can match. For the price of a bag of dried mushrooms that last for months, soak your dried shiake in cold water for at least 6 hours or overnight in the fridge. Let the liquid settle so any sediment falls to the bottom, and pour it carefully into your dish as a replacement for water or stock. That mushroom water is only one of the ingredients Japanese cooks rescue from being thrown away. The next trick moves us to the frying pot, where a single wooden chopstick can read the exact moment the oil is ready without any thermometer at all. A wooden chopstick lowers into a pot of hot oil, holds still for a moment, and a delicate ring of bubbles begins to rise around it to show that the oil is ready. For centuries before any thermometer existed, Japanese cooks have measured the exact temperature of frying oil with nothing more than a wooden chopstick. And the bubbles that gather around the wood are the signal. Western guides told home cooks they needed specialized equipment for accurate frying, which sold a lot of thermometers to a lot of families who did not actually, need them. The reading is simple once you have done it a few times. No bubbles at all means the oil is still too cool, and food will absorb it like a sponge. A few slow bubbles rising lazily around the wood means the oil is ready for gentle frying at roughly 300 degrees. A steady stream of bubbles means it is ready for tempura and quick fries at around 340 degrees. A furious burst of bubbles means the oil has climbed too high and needs to come down before anything goes in. One wooden chopstick tells you everything you need to know with no thermometer, no guesswork, and no equipment beyond what Japanese cooks have trusted for 1,000 years. But if a single chopstick can tell you what a thermometer, cannot wait until you see the raw egg white that turns ordinary ground meat into something no burger has ever tasted like. The mixing bowl holds a pound of ground meat, and one raw egg white slips down its side while a pair of hands folds it in for 2 full minutes before any other ingredient is added. For generations, every Japanese cook making tukun meatballs or filled dumplings has begun the mixture with one raw egg white worked thoroughly into every pound of ground meat before adding anything else. Western chefs for most of the 20th century warned that egg whites would make meat rubbery and dry, and generations of home cooks avoided the technique because of it. Egg white worked properly into ground meat before any other seasoning forms an elastic three-dimensional network throughout the mixture that traps moisture and fat during cooking. That network prevents the contraction that squeezes juices out of ordinary meatballs and burgers under heat. The result is a burger, meatball, or meatloaf that stays juicy, bouncy, and moist all the way through with a texture no breadcrumb or binder can achieve. Add 1 egg white per pound of ground chicken, music, pork, beef, or turkey, and mix it in thoroughly with your hand or a wooden spoon for 2 full minutes before adding salt, ginger, scallions, or any other seasoning. The next burger you cook will be different from every burger you have cooked before. But if a single egg white can transform ground meat, wait until you meet the final treasure of this journey. The small pot of sauce that Japanese families have kept alive for years, sometimes for generations. The small ceramic pot sits in the back of every serious Japanese kitchen, dark and glossy, half full of sauce that has been topped up, boiled, and used again and again for years. In some of Tokyo's oldest yakitori shops, the sauce carries an unbroken line back over a century. In yakuri shops, it is called tear. In soba houses, it is called keshi. And in old une restaurants, it is a living inheritance handed from one generation of cooks to the next. Western food safety authorities warned families to make sauce fresh every single time, which missed everything happening inside the pot. Every time the sauce is used to glaze meat or fish, proteins, fats, and brown compounds migrate from the food into the sauce and accumulate over time. Amino acids build up. Sugars caramelize at lower temperatures because the acidity and salt have risen. And what emerges after months of use is a depth of flavor no fresh sauce can produce. The extremely high salt and sugar concentrations combined with a full boil every time the sauce is used mean that bacterial growth is not remotely a concern. You can start your own tonight by combining soy sauce, mirin sake, and a little sugar in a small saucepan. Using it to glaze grilled chicken or pork, saving the leftover in the fridge, topping it up with fresh ingredients the next time boiling it, and using it again. Within a month, it will already be more complex than anything you can buy in a bottle, and within a year, it will be something you would never want to be without. As this journey ends, one truth remains. In Japan, cooking has always been about the small, invisible gestures. The splash of cold water, the smashed piece of ginger, the cotton cloth over a rice pot, the single pinch of salt at the right moment. These are inheritances passed hand to hand across generations, techniques for doing more with less that the modern world has almost forgotten. Every one of these 22 methods costs you nothing beyond a small change in attention and a willingness to trust what Japanese kitchens have been doing for centuries. Try 2 or 3 of them the next time you cook, and by the end of the month, your food will taste different. Your grocery bill will be lower. And something about the way you move around your kitchen will feel more settled and more intentional than it did before. That is what these methods were always about. Thank you for watching, and check out the video appearing on your screen right now. I think you'll like it. Till next.